month. In fact, the whole year should be International Women's Year. But welcome to our symposium in TU Dublin today on the topic of working, learning and caring. We're looking forward to unpacking the issues involved with our esteemed guests and speakers and colleagues over the morning, ending with lunch at about 1:30. And a very warm welcome to all our colleagues who are joining us online. Thank you for being patient with us, and we hope that the experience for you is as good as the experience for everybody in the room today. So this symposium, just so everybody knows, will be recorded. The recording has begun, and it will be uploaded on the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion website next week. We will share the links with all attendees then. And just in case you don't know who I am, this disembodied person speaking, my name is Yvonne Galligan. I'm Director of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion in TU Dublin, and it is my directorate that is organising this event. The whole team have been just amazing at doing that. So for some people, some of the discussion today may lead to an anxiety reaction, even though we want this space to be a supportive one and one of care. I would like to remind staff members of the Employee Assistance Service that is available 24/7, and students of the Student Counselling Service open from Monday to Friday 9 to 5, and the mental health platform Silver Cloud, which is accessible through the Student Counselling Service. And for other people, there are many other services available both online and within our communities and networks to address any anxiety reactions that may happen. We also want to acknowledge today that, that our speakers, and we thank them very, very sincerely for speaking, but our speakers are quite an homogenous group of white women in the main. We hope to bring many more voices to this conversation and bring diverse perspectives and experiences into future events as we continue with this dialogue with one another. Now, teas and coffees and water for people in the room are available throughout the morning outside the room. So please go, feel free to stand up, go and help yourself when you feel so inclined, because we will not have an official coffee break. All right, we will have a break though, don't worry. We will have a comfort break after the second session, but we felt that the first session of speakers and the second session of lived experiences were going to blend together so well that it would be a pity to break them up. So that's the reason for organising it this way. And of course, for our online colleagues, you're in the advantageous position of being able to grab a coffee or a water anytime you feel like yourselves. So to the business of the day. Our first session is on the policy and legislative context of care in Ireland. And to introduce us to this topic, we are joined by two eminent contributors, well known to many people in Ireland. That's Professor Helen Russell and Orla O'Connor. They will speak for about 20 minutes each, and we will follow their contributions with a question and answer session. So I'm now going to first introduce Helen, and after Helen has spoken, I will introduce Orla. Okay. So Helen, you're our first speaker today. Helen Russell is a research professor and head of the Social Research Division at the Economic and Social Research Institute, and she's an adjunct professor of sociology at Trinity College Dublin. Helen holds a DPhil in sociology from the University of Oxford. She has been carrying out policy-relevant research in both an Irish and European context for the last 25 years. Her research focuses on equality and social inclusion, and she has a long-term interest in gender equality in the labour market and in care. She is currently undertaking research comparing gender equality in Ireland, North and South, as part of the Shared Island initiative. Helen was a member of the expert advisory group for the recent Citizens' Assembly on Gender Equality and is a member of multiple policy advisory groups, including the Equality Budgeting Expert Advisory Group for the Department of Public Expenditure in Ireland. And that has to be a very interesting group, Helen, to be involved in, because the allocation of financial resources is such a gendered space. So it's really interesting to find that you're working in that area. So Helen is going to speak with us on the policy and legislative context. So you have the floor.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to get my slides here. Okay. So hopefully people online can see those as well.
I'm just going to start sharing the slides.
Okay,
yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. And I suppose just before I start, I'm going to present some work that I carried out with colleagues at the ESRI and with IREC, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission. So just to acknowledge, it's certainly not solo work. It's a team effort. I'm also going to present some findings from our some work we did as part of the Shared Island initiative, another study we did looking at supports for children and parents, looking at childcare and parental leave and those sort of issues, north and south. So I suppose as background, just to emphasize that how important care is for society, for us individually and for society as a whole. We all at some point in our lives require care. But unlike paid work, caring and unpaid work in the household is very rarely measured. So every quarter we measure how much paid work people are doing. We know a hell of a lot about people's employment, how many hours they're doing, what they're doing, but yet there's this whole other sphere that is equally important, if not more important, that we don't collect information on, and we don't make visible. And I think that contributes to it being, underestimated and undervalued. We also know that actually the unequal division of caring and unpaid work by gender is a really important factor in inequalities in the labour market. So things like the gender pay gap, the pensions pay gap, and many other issues in the labour market. So I'm going to give you present some research around the extent of care and unpaid work amongst women and men in Ireland, and look at EU comparisons and identify some policy lessons. So the results are from this European-wide survey that was carried out on a number of occasions, so 2007, 11, 16. There has been another one which was delayed because of the pandemic, so but that date hasn't been released yet, but we will, I think that should be very revealing as well. So people in the survey were asked, first of all, were they involved in caring for children or for somebody with a disability or somebody with additional needs? And they were then asked, if they said yes, then they were asked how many hours per week they were engaged in this. We find that overall that women spend almost twice as many hours on care work as men. Most of this is childcare. The incidence of people caring for an adult with a disability or an elderly person is less common, but for those who are involved, it's actually quite intensive. So this is looking first just at for the whole population, what proportion or how many hours per week people are spending on different types of care. So you can see here for the childcare, men it's 8.5 hours on average, women 19 hours. You see here for the adult care, it's much it's a smaller number of hours, and the gender difference is actually much narrower here, interestingly. And then the total care hours. So obviously there's a lot of people in here who are zero. So there's a lot of people in the population as a whole who aren't providing any of that care. So when you look at people who are regular carers, so at least participating at least weekly, providing such care, you can see that the hours are jumping up. So these are really substantial number of hours. So for women who are providing childcare, you're talking about 4 to 3 hours per week on average. So we're talking about this is an average. So there's obviously a big spread around that, but you know, this is a full-time job in terms of hours, and we can see here then that difference that I spoke of at the beginning, just this double the time that women are spending on care. Now you see similar patterns for housework, so that's caring, but also we all know that there's a lot of other work that's going on in the household and that everyone requires, which is including cooking. And again, we see for this that women are spending twice as many hours per week on this versus men. I find this result very surprising. So there's 81% of women report daily housework. So this is all ages, so it's adults of I think it's 18 and upwards. And only 44% of men are saying that they do cooking or housework daily. I think that's, you know, quite indicative that there's the majority are not doing any of this on a daily basis. So then looking at again the time, the hours per week. So we can see here again the total. If you look at the total on the far left, that's the again it's double the number of hours for women compared to men. And also it's interesting, I think, that this difference is here at each stage in the life course. So you can see it's here for 18 to 34 all the way up to 65 plus. So it seems to be slightly narrower in the oldest age group, but still very, very wide nevertheless. So I suppose that some of the economic theories would say, well, this is okay, this is specialization, you know, this is rational, that you know, the men are specializing within households, they're specializing in the paid work, and women are specializing in the unpaid work and caring, and it makes sense for the household as a whole. But actually, when we look at compare men and women doing the same amount of paid hours, so in employment, you still see these very big differences. So this is what's known as a second shift. So even when men and women are doing the same amount of paid employment, they still are doing significantly more housework and caring. And I think this is also important to note, really. So over half of those providing care on a daily basis are also in employment. So this is across men and women. So I just think that, you know, given the topic today, you know, it's really important to know people are very, very often combining these roles. So having the policies and the supports in place to allow people to do both is really important. I was searching for this. I thought, oh, I'll put up a nice picture, you know, about, you know, combining work and care, and I searched the internet, and this was one of the ones that I found. I thought, okay, it looks a bit too serene from my experience for trying to combine work and care. I wanted to find, you know, somebody making dinner in their coat, which is basically my experience, like running in when the kids are small, running in, having your coat on and trying to make the dinner at the same time. But anyway, all of the pictures of cooking on the internet, everyone looks amazingly happy, which I really don't think is necessarily the reality, and they all look
looking for a new husband. Would be talking to you enough at home.
Maybe that's it. But anyway, I thought that was as close as I could get. But yes, it does say something about the imagery that, yes, we're all delighted to be cooking all the time. It's such a gift. Anyway, so this is these are just the figures behind it. So basically here, we've got the different groups of men and women grouped according to the number of paid work hours that they're doing. And then on this axis here is the hours of unpaid work. So this is combining caring and housework. So you can see for people who are doing no paid work hours, the men are here, so around the 25-hour mark, and the women are up here. So there's this massive gap for the group that are doing 0 hours. Also pretty large gap for those working 1 to 30 hours in the paid workforce. And it's only then right at the group over here working very long hours of paid hours that we find that gender difference becomes non-significant. So it's not this necessarily this specialization isn't happening. The women are doing a double shift, and I think this is really, as I say, has really important consequences for things like you know, people's position in the labour market and what they can do, but also I think for well-being and access to leisure and all those other things as well. So just to show you the comparison here, so the advantage of this particular data set is that we can look across the whole of Europe, the whole of the EU, and this is again looking at the combined caring and housework hours. And you can see, so this is the gap in hours between men and women. And you can see that Ireland is marked here. We're out sort of the sixth widest in terms of that gender gap. And the countries that are sort of have the narrowest gap here in terms of total hours is, you know, are Sweden, Denmark, Finland, which we might expect to be here, and then some of the other the Baltic countries, Latvia, Estonia. Germany is probably a little bit of a maybe we might not expect them there, but I think this is interesting in terms of what the policies are within these different configurations. It's interesting, even in Sweden and Scandinavia, there's still this gap. Even in the nirvana of Scandinavia, there's still not a totally equal division of labour here. So and this is holding constant, you know, people's age and education. So these are results of a model where we're comparing women with men with children or whatever, and the same levels of education. So just moving then to sort of policy implications and what can we do to change this, I suppose. What are you know, what are the policies we need to put in place for this? So I suppose we need to look at two sets of things. One is that policies that support people's care needs, and also policies that encourage greater male participation in caring and housework, so that there's a more equal division of those roles. So the first thing is around the increasing state provision of formal care. So this is for childcare, older people, people with a disability, any of those care needs. So as we saw that European pattern, you know, the countries on the left-hand side were the ones that have very well-developed welfare states with high levels of services for both children and older people. And when we look at Ireland and on other data around unmet care needs, formal care needs, we find unsurprisingly that Ireland comes out pretty badly on those. So there's quite a high level of unmet need compared to elsewhere in Europe. There has been a lot of childcare policy development in Ireland over the last 10 years. So there's been the introduction of the free preschool year schemes. There's also been the new national childcare scheme, but we still have we're starting from a really low base. So I mean, I think we do need to acknowledge that there has been a hell of a lot of work in the area, and there has been a big increase in investment, but we were starting on a very low base. So this is looking at comparative childcare costs for different household types, and you see Ireland out here with the UK as being having the highest having the highest costs in terms of people's compared to people's income. So this is a real issue in terms of combining care and employment. The second big thing here that I just want to emphasize is the I'm only going to do 3, so I will be finished soon, is around parental leave policies. So enhancing those, especially for fathers, because to encourage greater participation in caring. So when we compare Ireland internationally, we're doing quite well in terms of the duration of care, but what we're not doing well on is the amount of benefits that people get, you know, what the replacement rate is for people who take that leave. So paid leave for fathers was only introduced for the first time in 2016. So that tells you a lot about what the gendered expectations are about who cares for young children. So that was the first time there was any payment, and that was 2 weeks. 2019, we introduced a sort of some additional paid weeks for both mothers and fathers. But it's all at a flat rate, and this also applies to maternity leave. So it's flat rate payments. All the statutory provision is at a flat rate. So that has, and we know this from comparing other countries as well, that has real implications for who takes it up, how many people avail of it, and who does. So it particularly discourages fathers from taking it up, and also lower income households. So it's socially divisive as well. And just to pop that up, which again is quite a stark chart. So this is again, this is very recent from just last year, looking at well-paid leave for parents, which is defined at 66% of earnings. And Ireland comes out worse than this, of course, the whole of the EU. We have no months of well-paid leave for either mothers or fathers. So I think that's an important context and something that we can change, and has long-lasting implications for the gender divisions within families. Finally, just to say, we also need changes at the organizational level, increasing flexible work options and normalizing men taking up these options. I think it's also important that flexibility is not just in sort of entry-level positions, but that it's all the way up through organizations, because I think that's often what happens. You can take up the flexible options until a certain stage, and then it's like no more, thank you very much, now you have to do really long hours. So I think this is something that needs to be tackled, and I think it's also worth saying that not all flexibility is equal. I mean, I think we are all, I mean, I thought maybe the pandemic and all the working from home might change something around that, but actually working from home is probably the type of flexibility that is has the least positive effect on work-life balance from the evidence. So not all flexibility is equal in terms of caring or gender. And I think just to conclude, I think it's really important that we make care visible. We make this work and housework, we make that visible, that we recognize its value. And I think, you know, measuring it as we do in these sort of studies is an important first step. I think the constitutional amendment is going to be another big opportunity for having this conversation and for making care visible as well. So I hope we all take that opportunity to emphasize it and to value it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Helen. This really gives us a really strong evidential base on the distribution of care among women and men, on which we can further develop our discussion around policies and around practices in that area. So thank you very much for giving us this information. I would now like to introduce our second speaker, Orla O'Connor. Orla is Director of the National Women's Council of Ireland, which is the leading national women's membership organisation in Ireland with over 190 member groups. And in fact, the National Women's Council has been campaigning around care and the importance of care, and public funding of childcare for decades, really. So Orla was co-director of Together for Yes, the national civil society campaign to remove the 8th Amendment in the referendum. For her role in Together for Yes, Orla was recognised as one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine in 2019. Now, isn't that one hell of an accolade? Orla holds an MA in European Social Policy, and after starting out in local community-based projects, she has worked in senior management in non-governmental organisations for over 25 years. Orla represents the National Women's Council in a wide range of national and international fora, and indeed she's a very familiar figure on all our television screens. She is a feminist. She is an expert in the policies needed to progress women's equality in Ireland. She is an accomplished public speaker with a strong analysis of public policy. Orla has led numerous high-level successful campaigns on a wide range of issues on women's rights, including social welfare reform, pension reform, and for the introduction of quality and affordable childcare. Orla is passionate about ensuring access to women's reproductive rights, about ensuring more women are in leadership positions, about ending violence against women, and increasing women's economic equality. And she probably is in the ideal role to be able to pursue all of those agendas. But it is now my great pleasure to invite Orla to address us.
Thank you. I have to live up to that introduction.
Yeah, so just first of all say thank you for inviting me. I think it's really important to be having these discussions on care. And what I think I'm going to try and do is maybe put out what we see in the National Women's Council as a feminist model of care. And it's interesting, we're 50 years this year. And we've been looking back on the Women's Council when it was set up in 1973. And it was the first commission on the status of women. And it is interesting looking at that because care, of course, features back then, and particularly around the issue of childcare and the lack of childcare. And I think just looking at what Helen has just put up, it's still, we're still here campaigning on many of the same issues around care, even though some things have obviously changed and got better. So in terms for the National Women's Council, this is a critical issue. And we really see this issue of care as going to the centre of women's equality and women's rights. And we have long advocated for a change, I suppose, in how we treat care, how we value care. And we see care as absolutely essential to the common good, but it's hugely undervalued. We know that women continue to do more care, unpaid care work in the home, while also being in paid employment, as Helen has put out. And also, I think it is important that in the aftermath of COVID, there was a renewed, we certainly felt that, a renewed conversation, a renewed focus on care in terms of the importance of it for the functioning of our society, and also in terms of the value of it. But we also really saw, I suppose, through that experience, women undertaking more care in relation to family, friends. And also when we did some research in terms of women's experiences through COVID, I suppose the issue of the responsibility of care for women became a much, much bigger feature. And what was interesting, I suppose, is that given there were certain periods where, men and women were at home, and yet there was no real shift in that responsibility piece. And I think that was important. So for us in the Women's Council, we think there really needs to be a shift in the whole conversation and the narrative about care. And our understanding of care, it's broad, it acknowledges care across the lifespan. It recognises it in terms of that we all both give and receive care, and that it can be fulfilling, but it's also a necessary experience. So it's absolutely fundamental to our lives. And I think that's why it's so important we're going to have this conversation about the Constitution. And it also enables us to realise our potential in so many different ways. It's a vital component in terms of child development. It can enable older people and those with health difficulties or disabilities to live fuller lives and also a greater independence and dignity. But providing care involves energy, time and effort. And time that's invested in care is time that cannot be spent doing other things. And whether that's about participation in employment, but it's also about participation in community life, in social life, in civic life, in leadership as well. And that's why the way in which care is divided between women and men is so important, but also, and I'll talk a bit more about this, in terms of the responsibility of the state. So in our view, we really need that shift around the narrative of care and to take it out of the private sphere in terms of being in our homes and being predominantly in the lives of women. And the Constitution is the first place for that. There is a clear public demand now, in our view, towards an inclusive feminist model of care. And I think a really, a good articulation of that is the Citizens Assembly. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but the Citizens Assembly report on gender equality was really far-reaching and very ambitious in terms of what needs to change in Irish society with regard to care. Their recommendations on care were really comprehensive. They focused on issues including delivery of a public childcare model, recognising the critical, recognising the critical work the paid care workforce involves, but also recognising that it's predominantly precarious, it's low paid, there's a huge emphasis on migrant women and they're vulnerable to precarious work and exploitation. And also within the Citizens Assembly report, and I think this is really important and it's going to be important in the conversation in relation to the Constitution, is there was a strong emphasis in that report on looking at the needs of disabled people and seeing care as a right. And it is about disabled people having agency with regard to their care. And for me, I think that's really important, and I know that is for our members. And also what the Citizens Assembly said was that it shouldn't be about incremental change. This is urgent. This is affecting women's lives. They really called for urgency. And they said that it starts with changing the Constitution. And where that starts in the Constitution is under Article 41.2. And Article 41.2 currently talks about women's role being in the home. And in our view, the language around that is very sexist and discriminatory, should have been changed years ago. And it doesn't reflect the diversity of women's lives. And it also does not recognise the work which men do as well, albeit need to do a lot more in the area of care, but it doesn't recognise any role for men. So it really does need to change because it presumes a very male breadwinner model where the woman stays at home, and it doesn't take into account the reality of the diversity of families as well with regard to lone parents, LGBTQ families, or blended families. So the recommendations that the Citizens Assembly have made is that removing the sexist language with regard to women in the home, but replacing it with a value of care. And they've also then made a secondary recommendation, which is to change the definition of the family, that it wouldn't be one limited to marriage. So it recognises, the change is about recognising all families, not only families based on marriage. So there's a real opportunity in our view around this change. And after the Citizens Assembly made the recommendations, it then went into a joint Oireachtas committee. So the joint Oireachtas committee has now reported also a really far-reaching report. And I was, we were really welcoming of the joint Oireachtas committee report because it's a cross-party report, and not only on the Constitution, but on wider areas as well in relation to other aspects of care. So there now is a recommendation from the Joint Oireachtas Committee to take forward this referendum, and the government have announced that it will be in November. And for us, it is about the referendum, and it's about that, going to tick the box on the day, but it's also about the conversation that we want as part of this referendum campaign, which is all about all of the issues in relation to care, so that it sets us up to have that, changed position with regard to policy and legislation. And the types of things for the National Women's Council in relation to that is first and foremost very much about delivering public care services. It is about the role of the state with regard to care. We've seen, and I mean, Helen has put, I think, so much of the research forward, but we know that, in Ireland, there is far more unpaid caring work than anywhere else in the EU. And one of the key factors underpinning this high level of unpaid care is our underinvestment in public services and our reliance on private services. And I mean, one of the examples that we can see is that, where you have that marketized model of care, that's where you get the issues in terms of low paid precarious work. And we've also seen as well, so I suppose for us, it is about public care services, and then it's about looking at, so, okay, what is it that we want to be provided? We want to see public early years education and care services. We know that affordability is an enormous issue for parents, and the affordability issue is there because we're relying on a private market. And while we have seen investment and positive investment, and probably the last budget was very significant, and we really welcomed it because it was for the first time the state is now involved in paying the wages of the childcare sector. So that's a big step forward in terms of moving to a public model. But we still have a model that is based on a for-profit model, and that's why we end up with the affordability issue. So there's much more that needs to be done in terms of early years. And similarly, there's an absence of a sufficient state response in terms of supporting disabled and older people with regard to care services. Home care has been progressively privatised in Ireland to a largely unregulated industry, high fees, varied quality, and poor terms and conditions for workers. Care workers predominantly across our social care services are migrant women. And who are very vulnerable, and we know that we know how important these care services are, and this is only growing as we have an aging population. But yet we still have this model where the state does not play that key role. So we need an investment in a public model rather than dependence on the market to provide services. And there really is a conflict between making services affordable for the public and having good pay and working conditions for care workers. Across Europe, and research has shown this, the most important factor in lowering the pay and conditions in care workers is the extent to which care is marketised. In countries with public early years education and care, services are more affordable, accessible, and of higher quality with regard to the pay and conditions of workers. So that's why for us, this is such a big part of this conversation, and is one that often doesn't get put out there enough, because we do talk about funding and investment of the state, but we don't talk about the shift that's needed in the model in terms of moving it into a public model. And then alongside that, and Helen touched on this as well, we also need to reform our systems surrounding care. We need reform of our social protection model and also of our family-friendly policies. For example, eligibility for job seekers payments requires women with care responsibilities to prove they can work full-time. Now, so we still have a model in our social protection system that's based on that male breadwinner model of the full-time work model. There still isn't sufficient recognition of part-time work within our system. And we've also seen, significant changes to lone parent payments, particularly during the austerity years, which meant that lone parents' care responsibilities are disregarded once a child turns 14. And that often is not possible for some parents. We know that, as I've said, that in terms of women predominated part-time work, but part-time work is not recognised. And actually, research from Helen's organisation, the ESRI, said currently only full-time employment is really effective in terms of lifting families out of poverty. So, and these findings are hugely problematic for the women who work part-time, and but particularly as well for lone and one-parent families. And similarly, our family-friendly policies and our paid leave is also critical to combining work and family life. And while we have seen advances, they certainly do not go far enough, in our view, in terms of the level of payment that's provided. And that is the one feature we are seeing, that when they are properly paid, that men are more likely to take them up, albeit still in Scandinavian countries at a lower level, but it is one of the factors in terms of making that shift. And I think the other piece in terms of our feminist model of care is the cultural change that's needed in terms of the distribution of care work between women and men. So yes, we need the public model, we need that huge state intervention, but we also need a shift in terms of how we see care and the importance of it to our lives. And that's why I'm going to just finish on a call, really, in terms of the referendum, because part of that cultural change can come about from having that public conversation. And I think, sometimes we get these opportunities in Ireland for significant change, for moments of change to happen. And this will be one of them in November. So I suppose, this will be a time where we can actually really, mobilize and act, become active on it. So we can move from the academic discussions on care and actually really get out there and change it. And I suppose I'm really calling on all of you who are interested in this issue to be part of that, to be part of those conversations. We know conversations change people's minds, they make a difference, but it's also about becoming involved in local groups that will happen as a result of the referendum. So it's a real call for us all to get involved, because we need this public conversation to be out there, so that after the referendum, when hopefully we will succeed, and I've no doubt we will, that we can, I suppose, accelerate the pace of change in relation to the issues we're talking about today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Orla. I think many of the bigger points that you raise in terms of the policy questions and how the social welfare or social security system is structured are absolutely critical to the issue of care, which brings it beyond the individual experience into a system-wide and an institutional experience, and how we as institutions, public institutions, organisations such as DU Dublin, how we structure care as well is very important. So thank you so much for that really interesting talk, and thank you also to Helen previously for your talk as well. I'd like to invite you both to come up here, please, because we're going to open the session to questions and answers and discussion. So this is the beginning part of our discussion of the day. So people online are very welcome to put their hand up and I will bring you in, and people in the room also very welcome to begin to contribute. So anybody like to raise any thoughts or any questions around any of that? So far, anything strike you in terms of our speakers' presentations? Yeah, Alicia, and it's helpful if you introduce yourself. Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for that. My name is Alicia Bobrok and I work for the EDI and the Rennick Research Center. So I think I have a question for both of you. From the time angle, I think with Helen is more about the data, from Orla more advocacy. And I guess it comes from my own research that I've been doing and the experience with Helen and the anecdotal evidence. So for Helen, and for Orla, I think that the elephant in the room that is unspoken about, and it's because we keep focusing on affordability of childcare. Nobody speaks about accessibility and availability. And then because of the market model, the state involvement, how it actually diminishes both. So I found that, and I think Childcare Ireland had called for data on that one, and I don't think there is, so that's the question for Helen. When the baby room regulations were introduced, baby room had to shut down. Now, I found recently sending my son to school, all after schools are gone. Because in 2019, there was a new regulations on after schools. So just an example, in D1, there was not a single after school for paid, it's all community delivered, which actually then it's a vicious circle, I find, because like I'm in the paid employment, I can't avail of those. But if you are a mother who is on the work to work program, you can avail those for a limited time. Once you find work, you're out of that. So you can't avail the after school. And it's the same for the baby rooms that, you're out of your maternity leave, but you have to find 9 months because it's 18 months plus. So I guess the question is for Helen, is there any data? Because all I can find is Pobol giving us the number of crashes offering those, but we don't know what is the mismatch. But then for Orla, how to maybe bring that into the advocacy campaign, that is actually one of the reasons why we should have a public model, because public model wouldn't care if it's for profit, if it's bringing the profit or not. Sorry for a long comment, but I think it's an important issue.
Yeah, addressing the hard facts, the lived experience of the system that we have at the moment. So maybe we turn to Helen and then to Orla.
Yeah, no, that's, you're absolutely right that there is a big issue around accessibility. I think especially as you say, under ones now has become a big issue, and this sort of that unintended consequence, I think, partly of the investment in the sort of early years, the preschool period. It not only focused, and again, it's a result of this market model, so it focused the attention of the providers on that area because on that group, because that's where they got the funding for and got guaranteed funding for. And also then there was another unintended consequence was that all the carers with the childcare providers with the higher qualifications were all put into that age group as well. So there is a huge issue about accessibility. The study that we just did recently on the north-south, that was interviews with stakeholders. So it's not, but you were asked about data, so it was coming up certainly in the conversations with stakeholders that there is a big issue for the under ones, especially in urban areas in Ireland. In Northern Ireland, it was more around they had big issues in rural areas. So there was a difference there, but both systems had a problem in terms of the supply. The after school care is also a huge issue. We did some research on it, looking at the Growing Up in Ireland cohort, but obviously they're now our youngest group are now 13, so it's at a particular point in time, but I don't think those issues have been resolved. That's really the Cinderella of the whole system, as well as the after school, and I think you're right with the pandemic made it worse.
And I think, I mean, you're really right to raise it, because one is the data that we don't have. So all of the evidence is anecdotal, are qualitative pieces that have been done by different organisations. And I mean, I should have mentioned it in mine because it is part of our advocacy, because particularly from the research we did as well around, the coming out of COVID, because all those decisions around the under ones, it's about space, it's all about economic viability, it's about space, it's about insurance. So again, you wouldn't have those in public model. And what also women are raising with us now is that in hybrid, working hybrid, but they're having to pay for a full-time childcare place because you can't pay for a part-time place, because it's not economically viable for places to try to manage that when they can fill up the services by full-time places. So it's all meeting an economic need rather than the needs of children or the needs of parents. So yeah, and we need more data on it, because in terms of our lobbying, we're saying these things, but it does go back to the model. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
I think I have.
Sorry, two people. Yeah, yourself first.
I think I'm Naomi. The comment I have to add to the after school is trying to find the places, but also when you get that place, you're told your child has to commit to so many hours, and if they go below that, then they say they have to contact the NCS to say they're not going. So you're going to lose it. So for the likes of me, I'm in a position, a child with school avoidance. She's not going to after school. So I'm at that kind of rock and a hard place now, that I could possibly lose that place and then have no childcare.
Can you just, for the benefit of people that might not know, just explain what NCS means?
It's the National Childcare Scheme, and it's the funding that the government give to providers. But even trying to find that, the amount of providers that didn't take NCS. So I was very lucky when I did get a place, but now it kind of hangs in the balance as well.
Oh, yes, that's
Because there's no flexibility with the model.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
But this is totally unrelated to childcare. It's more care of the elderly. And is there ever going to be a policy where more support is given to those that are working outside the home? You then have elderly parents. It's well recognised that people are living much longer. So it's so hard to access the services. it's pop look, you lobby. And yet, if you're to work full time, you're obviously not caring that well for the elderly. If you work part time, it is financial. But there's nothing there then. It's all ad hoc.
Yeah.
So will you ever develop a policy that, and like it's well known, I mean, plenty of 90-plus-year-olds who are totally independent, but then you have suddenly they're in declining health. We all know we're going to live longer because of medical science. So is it time for you to start looking at some sort of support that can be put in place, or?
I think, yeah. I mean, that's, I suppose, what I was saying about when we're talking about public services, we're not just talking about early years, we're also talking about care for older people, but we're also talking about care as well in terms of the model around disabled people. But yeah, you're absolutely right, it's completely ad hoc, and there isn't, beyond the fair deal scheme and that bit of home health respite, it's a completely ad hoc service. It's a full private model, really, bar the fair deal scheme. But there is no proper infrastructure or proper model or proper government strategy for the care of older people. And while there's been pieces of research, even for ourselves, like we're actually doing a piece of work at the minute with UCC around, okay, what does a feminist model of care for older people look like? Because we need to actually go back a bit like what we did with childcare in terms of starting to put this out, and also to look at the models in other countries. But you're right, there isn't even the same type of sort of lobby around that, I don't think. But I do think that starting has people realise how bad the system is, and people trying to navigate it for their parents.
Yeah, because most of the time it's just if you're there in a crisis.
Yeah.
And but then you go and you look, and it seems now ridiculous in this day and age. All you hear about is, with due respect, I have been through the small people childcare system, but you go and you look at the end result for older people. There's nothing there. So maybe it is time for actual understanding.
Okay, so we have another person who'd like to put a question in, who is in the room. I'm just going to turn to our online colleagues, and if any of you would like to follow up with a question, just please indicate, just use the raise hand sign, and I'll bring you in after our next contributor.
Hi, I'm Margaret Hamilton, and I'm a lecturer here in TU Dublin in social care, and I've done some research on Black minority ethnic social care workers' experiences in Ireland. And I suppose I'm interested in who these carers are going to be and who they are now. I think the quality of care and also the conditions of employment. And just looking at kind of, I suppose, from a global perspective, the global care chain movement, where basically the movement of workers from the global south to the global north to fill these care positions, and how vulnerable they are in terms of everything from, in fact, the research shows that they see care as actually the only pathway into the workforce, because there is no criteria. You can work in care without having any qualifications, without having any language competency, without sometimes even having a guarded vetting or checking. And also, I think going forward, the care needs, we can see the demographics and how care is going to increase. And yet we as an Irish population don't really see care as a profession at any level. So I suppose I just wondered, have you done any research on that whole area in terms of, who's going to fill these roles, whether they're for children, disability? I think we all have care needs at some level. I mean, I can think even just siloing them is a pity, because we've got people with mental health issues, we have addiction, we have homelessness. These are all people who require care. And if we start to say, well, there's children, there's people with disabilities, and there's older people, what about everybody else, including ourselves, who might need temporary care or short-term care or whatever? So I suppose just wanted to know, have you looked at that kind of broader kind of maybe international perspective?
Okay, I think maybe we can, both of you probably have responses to this one, yeah?
Sure. I mean, it's something that some of my colleagues in the ESRI work on in the health team have been looking at the demands, I suppose, for care for older people, especially, but also people with disabilities. So I mean, the projections, as you can imagine, are they're not surprising, but the requirement for the number of care workers that we're going to need to have a decent system in place are really huge. So there's you know, very high level of demand for workers in that sector, but the issues that Orla raised are you know, and that you yourself there raised there are really important around the quality of those positions, you know, and the conditions that care workers in both the, you know, the early care and elder care, I think are particularly poor, you know, the pay and the other conditions, the insecurity. So I mean, I think there's a huge job of work to be done there, because I you know, we're not going to attract workers with high qualifications if the conditions are really poor. This goes back again to the public model, you know, that's really what's needed for you know, to deal with both sides of the equation, for both the quality of the care, the accessibility, the affordability, and then also the conditions for the workers themselves, because you know, as you found in your research and Orla, it's a lot of the time it's migrant workers who are occupying these positions as well. I think predominantly women, and so there's longer term consequences then of those low pay conditions.
And I think you're right, it is an area that's needed in terms of research and data, because the whole issue about who's doing the caring, particularly beyond early years, there just isn't a lot of research and data. I mean, we don't have research budgets, so we sort of partner with people in universities to do pieces like that, and that's why we're doing the piece on a care model of older people. So but I completely agree with you. It's needed. The only real research that's been done on that so far is by one of our members, the Migrant Rights Centre, because they've got a care co-op. It's a co-op of care workers who have come together, and it's both a support network as well. But yeah, I mean, I agree, it's needed. Yeah,
we did a little bit of research just during COVID, with some comments of some colleagues looking at the migrant workers during the COVID pandemic, because they you know, the results from other countries were showing, you know, higher rates of infection and higher mortality rates for ethnic minority groups in the UK and other places from COVID. So we were looking at both the role that migrants were playing in the health services in particular. We couldn't break it down in terms of what I don't think we had much detail in terms of the occupations within health and social care, but you could certainly see that migrant women in particular were much more likely to be employed in health occupations, and were less likely to be able to work from home, you know, in those sort of occupations. So that did expose them to higher risks of COVID. So it's a small piece of research, but was using the national data.
Okay, there doesn't seem to be anyone online, but yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that hand. Breed. Sorry, Breed. So can you come in now, Breed?
Yeah, apologies. I know that hand only went up last minute, Yvonne. So it wasn't your eyesight. It was me being slow. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can perfectly.
Thanks a million to Helen and to Orla, and I think really interesting. And I just wanted to come back on the kind of culture shift point, which I think is really, really important. And I'm saying that as a working mother, working half-time, I'm an employee at TU Dublin. And obviously, while we can bring in policy, I think it just, you know, that shift in culture. And I think, and maybe this will go to the discussions afterwards as well, but I see we obviously need a shift in culture in terms of our own employees, but also in terms of our teaching and learning spaces, because, and I suppose all my experience of students, I have a big cohort of students who are working mothers, single parents. I'm based in Blanchardstown, quite a number from migrant backgrounds. And I'm saying that as a middle class, you know, mother who somebody else is minding my children, you know, and yet these students are doing the school run. They're looking to leave class at 3 o'clock because they have to go and mind and care themselves, and they are working part-time as well to be able to support them. So I suppose it's those different levels of power and privilege amongst all of those groups. And I'm thinking just in terms of us as an organisation for our own employees, but also in terms of our students. I suppose I just wanted to bring that in, that it's just that multiplicity or that intersection, I suppose, kind of dimension to it, that I think, you know, we do need to, and particularly around that cultural, I think it's that cultural shift of how do we make, you know, get rid of the stereotypes and just make it a more equitable system for everybody.
Thanks very much, Breed. And maybe this will be the last response from our speakers, and we'll move into our next panel after this. So, Orla?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when you describe it, you really do show the sort of multi-layered issue that care is and how it affects our lives. And I suppose when I was listening to you, I was thinking of just some of the people saying to me at the minute, but you know, we don't really need care in our constitution. We should, you know, it's for policy and legislation, but in a way, it is about, you know, in order to bring about the cultural shift I think we want, it is about saying this is so important to all of our lives in so many different ways, that putting it up there will change how, you know, or at least will give us I suppose, some of the fundamentals for how then you go on and you change it in policy legislation, but changing our thinking. And that is about how we organise society, how we organise work, how we, like, same debate going on in the Dáil at the minute in terms of, you know, how we organise our politics when we don't even give maternity leave to our TDs. Like, so it's about all of our thinking in terms of lots of different things. So there's no easy answers, I think, to what you're saying about how you bring about that cultural change. But, you know, certainly I think this referendum will help that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. We just need to have that lens, I think, when we're looking at how we organise things. I think, you know, probably the universities have done a lot of work in terms of providing education more flexibly, some more than others, but you know, we still look at things like employment training schemes. A lot of those are still, you know, full-time, or they have to, you know, they'll only start at 9 a.m. in the morning. We've been talking about this, you know, for, you know, 20, 30 years, and it's still, there's still these sort of rigidities in the system, which, because we still seem to have this ideal type of what a worker or a student looks like, and there's somebody who's somehow unencumbered by any other roles outside of work. And I think we really need to, yes, I agree, have that conversation so that people lose those stereotypes.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And I think that conversation and that piece is a really good point at which to end this particular panel. So can you please join me in thanking Helen and so that's a great kickoff, a great contextualizing of our next panel, which is a panel around lived experiences. So in this particular panel, we are going to hear the experiences, the real lived experiences of people who combine caring with their working and or learning. So we have 4 speakers with us, and we will invite them to come up here in a moment. We get another chair, don't worry. and we will also have the voices of others who cannot be with us today. And I think Noreen is going to bring those voices into the equation. So can I please invite Sarah Rennick, Naomi Connolly, Karen McWeeney, and Julie Bernard up here, please. I think it's probably the easiest way to come. Thank you. So each of our speakers will now give us a 5-minute snapshot of their experiences, and then we will have time for a whole group discussion, And after this session, we will have a short comfort break. But if anybody feels that they need to nip out for a cup of coffee at this point or a quick comfort break, the bathrooms are just across the hall. Okay, so Sarah, maybe we will begin with you.
I'm sorry, Sarah, can you just walk to the mic?
Yeah.
While we talk, just so that people online can hear.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, good morning, colleagues and guests. My name is Sarah Rennick, and I work part-time in the Career Development Centre in Blanchardstown. I met my husband when we worked together in the UK. We were both in senior management roles. We moved to Ireland in 1996 when I was pregnant with our second child. The plan was that I would be a stay-at-home parent, a role I wanted, until such time as either the children went to school or I no longer wanted to be a stay-at-home parent. I didn't envisage difficulty in either finding a role within the industry I loved, where I was known, well regarded and had contacts, or an equivalent role in another area. In 1999, at the age of 3, our daughter was diagnosed with autism. It was a seismic shift. Naively, as it transpired, I expected a roadmap, signposting to supports and therapeutic interventions. We were told that there were limited places for our daughter for preschool and no guarantee of school placement. There were long waiting lists for therapists. 25 years ago, we found ourselves in a situation where, having recently moved, we had no knowledge of the health, education, or social welfare system. The services we were engaging with were underfunded and overwhelmed. We had no knowledge of the disability our daughter had. Autism was only recognised as a disability in Ireland in the late 90s, and information was scarce. There was one book in the library on autism. IT was in its infancy in the home, had no internet connection. Even if we had no PC. We had no mobile phones. We were socially isolated with no family close by and no close friends. We suffered from anxiety and fear for the future for ourselves and our children. We were looking at financial insecurity, and I was facing employment insecurity. We were also trying to process what this diagnosis meant for our daughter, ourselves, and our family. We grieved, carried guilt, and I firmly refuted the term carer. I was and will always be her mother. This is not unusual. Many people find it difficult to accept that the support they are providing is care work. Then they need to accept that this is and will continue to be the case. I recall another parent I talked to at the time told me she just accepted that she would never work again. Our son was then diagnosed with high-functioning autism. We got used to having our children assessed and reassessed, defined in negative terminology. I cannot impress upon you enough the impact that this journey has on one's sense of self-worth. I had always worked and earned my own money. My employment status was part of my identity. I was exhausted, on call 24/7. I didn't feel recognised, valued, or appreciated by society. Care work came with another package. I would suffer long-term financial implications and fall behind with upskilling opportunities. I did, however, develop other skills. My husband and I made a pact. He would do the macro, I would do the micro. While he was lobbying for funding and placements, I learned how to be an unqualified speech therapist, occupational therapist, sensory integration therapist, play therapist, dietitian, and behaviourist. I routinely communicated and negotiated with services and schools in order to reach good outcomes and win-win solutions. I sat on stakeholder groups with NGOs, and I networked. I looked up the HSE definition of a carer, the job description, if you will. Someone who is providing an ongoing significant level of care to a person who is in need of care in the home due to illness or disability or frailty. What this does not cover is advocacy, negotiating, lobbying, future planning. Oh, and it's not just in the home, by the way. I'm still micromanaging my daughter, who is in a daily adult outreach program. My daughter is now 26, soon to be 27. I recently had a meeting with 2 of my colleagues where, having agreed to meet in person, I had to email and ask if I could join virtually. Due to an emergency, I needed to supervise our daughter transitioning to her service. When my husband was offered another promotion, which would have taken us back to the UK and their family, he had to turn it down, as the waiting list for services meant it would be 2 to 3 years before our daughter could get a school place or therapist. I have been extremely fortunate that my line managers have been flexible, understanding and compassionate. When I come to work, I get a part of my identity back. I feel valued. The most important information, support and expertise I've had on this journey came from other carers. Peer support is invaluable, and the Carers Coffee Morning set up by Linda Murray in People Development is a great example of the type of opportunity employers can offer for informal connections. Another way to provide support is a carer's passport scheme. A carer's passport in employment is essentially a conversation about the flexibility needed to combine work and care. It aims to balance the needs of the individual with the needs and policies of the business. Introducing training modules, for example, in advocacy and future planning for carers within the existing pupil development framework would provide practical tools. Awareness training for staff and managers helps build an inclusive culture. I'm appreciative of the opportunity to share my lived experience with you. The sharing of stories is so valuable. I'd like to see the opportunity to contribute one's lived experience extended and a resource curated which could be made available to staff, managers and researchers within the TU Dublin community. Thank you.
And Naomi, would you like to?
I'm Naomi. I am a second year social care student in TU Blanchardstown. I have 3 children, 2 are autistic and 1 suffers with severe anxiety. I am parenting alone due to a history of domestic violence, so that adds an extra layer for me, challenge-wise. Before I went back to education, I was working part-time. It wasn't easy because all the responsibilities fell on me. I was told in my employment that I took more time off than everybody else. Despite my work being done, I took work home, I worked in the evenings. I went in early after I dropped the children to school, but I was told you take more time off. And in one meeting with the owner of the company, he said to me, would you not be better off on social welfare as a single parent? I was very offended by that because I wanted to work. It gave me an identity, just like Sarah said, it gives you a sense of identity because being at home is very, very tough, especially with young children and children with needs. Now I lost that particular job in 2020. While I was devastated because I was losing my financial independence again, I'd lost it previously through domestic violence. I was losing my financial independence again, but I decided to look at the positive and I returned to education. I naively probably thought that it would be a bit easier to manage the children around education and their appointments. But unfortunately, it's not really the case. While I am not full-time on campus, I still have issues around mandatory lectures. My course is Coro approved, so I have to meet a strict 80% attendance. So when I'm offered appointments for the children, I'm caught. Do I attend the mandatory lecture or do I take that very scarce appointment that may not come up again, or I may go to the bottom of the list? And that's both privately and publicly. I've had no public appointments. The private appointments I save to pay for. The other thing I have is if I don't meet that attendance, I fail regardless of whether I pass my CAs, I pass my exams. If I don't meet that attendance, I fail. And I understand the regulation for social care. It is important, but at the same time, there needs to be that bit of flexibility. I was recently sick on placement. I struggled with 400 hours. I just know that Deirdre had posted about students struggling with the 400 hours because it's so tight in time from the end of September. I was granted an extension into January to complete my placement hours, but I had to get those 400 hours done. So me being sick was a struggle. I was very lucky that I had a good friend who's also a single parent. She was able to take my children for me and continue with their routine. without her, I would have been lost. Because my own mother is too ill to take care of my children. Then on the financial side of it as well, it is a struggle, because again, for those 400 hours, because I was essentially being marked, I was doing a 40-hour week. I lost my carer's allowance, that goes, because you can only do 18 and a half hours. And it doesn't matter that I wasn't getting paid for these hours. Even my lecture hours are taken into account for carers. So it puts that financial struggle. And yes, TU Dublin do have a good support system, but it still is a struggle to get on and stay financially viable, even because I'm paying for childcare as well. I still pay nearly 300 a month for after school for my 2 children. I was afraid to say they were autistic, because I was afraid I wouldn't get a place for them. At the moment, my friend takes my children because one of my children is struggling with school avoidance. She'll only go into school twice a week because she has issues with our formal uniform. So, and it was mentioned about students having to leave early or for their childcare. I've been there, and making those 9 a.m. lectures, mandatory lectures, was something that as a class rep, other students brought to me, and I brought to our social care boards. So hopefully that can be looked at in the future. But it's very difficult to try and manage. I naively thought it would be easier. It's not really, but I'm still going to do it. And as well, I want to say to people that you can do it. It's a struggle, but it is doable.
Thank you very much, Naomi. Can we now invite Karen McWeeney to come to the microphone?
Good morning. My name is Karen McWeeney, and I've worked in TU Dublin for the last 32 years. For the first 20, I worked full-time in Calvary Street in College of Catering as the cafeteria manager, where I managed a team of 15 and we served over 1,000 customers a day. So it was a busy, busy job. In 2010, my job was then outsourced to contract caterers, and I was redeployed to library services, which I have to say was probably the best thing that happened. I was given the choice of working part-time or full-time, and I chose part-time because at that stage I recognised I was part of the sandwich generation, caring for young and caring for the elderly. My son at the time was 8, and my parents were in their late 70s and needing a little bit of support, but nothing like what was subsequently required. And by working in library services at the time, there was, because there was a jobs embargo at the time, there was a lot of extra hours to be worked. And my manager at the time recognised that I was available to work Saturdays, or I could do a few evenings, so long as I took the time off out of term, which to me was just like happy days. I have cover. I can be at home in the summer when I want to be. I can be off in the school holidays. So it was a win-win. He was delighted he had kept the library open, and I was delighted I was off in the summer. So then as time goes on, I realised my parents then needed a lot more support. They were becoming more dependent on me, and my son was becoming more independent. So in order to care for them and make the best of it, I developed an incredible skill set, and this is just some of it, in order to keep the home front going, work going, and them. I was a time manager, a juggler, a project manager, a strategist, skilled negotiator, because they didn't always like the carers that came in. The conflict resolution, she's not coming here tonight, and of course she is. Maybe they wanted a divorce as well. That was one night. They'd only been married 58 years, and a divorce was required at 8 o'clock at night. It was quite sad and quite funny, because my dad was beginning to get dementia, and he just didn't like her sitting in the corner taking his money. So anyway, we negotiated and it was okay. Understanding the state system, as we've all said, is just a minefield. And care of the elderly is just something else. We really don't, or the lovely tags of fair deal, home care support, but you've got to manage it all. And have you ever filled out the paperwork for fair deals? I'm actually blessed I never had to, because I worked part-time. Crisis manage. The phone is always on. You get the phone call 11 o'clock at night, you're on your way to bed, but you're not going because somebody's collapsed at home. So you head to A&E and all the drama with that. My friend actually reminded me when I told him about today, he said, and what about all the support that you gave us to care for our parents and making sure that they had the best care and nobody ever ended up in a nursing home? They all got what they wanted because of your knowledge and making sure that they had. And you not just did it to my friends, it was friends of friends as well. He said, don't forget that bit. But I've always remember sitting in A&E, and I'm sure some of you can relate to this, 4 o'clock in the morning, it's a working day, and you're kind of going, oh gosh, I wonder will he get admitted soon? I can go home and have a rest for a few hours. Anyway, thankfully, my dad had dementia, so you can't leave a dementia patient in A&E on their own. It's just too scary for them, and the hospital don't like you doing it. You just can't do it. Got him admitted, you get home from hospital 5 in the morning, you just turn around and you keep going because you know you haven't booked a day's leave off. There is nothing else there for you to take. You're not sick. So you just get up and you go. But my mindset always was, I'm only there till lunchtime. So I'll be fine. I'll only be a bit tired. I'll be okay. So now we've all mentioned about, because I've worked part-time for so long, there's obviously a financial implication. There's a pension implication. So you're looking at the whole sphere of life. And you also, it's a bit frustrating now, you see the employers are advertising the same jobs again and again and again. They're not able to recruit. We have full employment. So maybe it's time to readjust the balance of maybe more part-time, reduced hours. It doesn't have to be just part-time. A reduced hours, it might be instead of 37, it's a 30-hour program. Something like that might help. And also when you see how some companies are offering, let's TU Dublin maybe be a lead on something. One of the main banks has brought in fertility care leave and also menopausal leave. So maybe there's something there for carers. But anyway, thank you very much for this morning, and thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And now we invite Julie Bernard to take the floor.
Thanks, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Bernard, as one has said. I'm a career coach by profession. I'm working in TU Dublin for almost 20 years. Not sure how that happened, but there we have it. Firstly, as a manager of the Access Service, then I was the head of Access and Civic Engagement, and I've recently taken up the post of deputy head in recruitment, admissions, and participation. That's a summary of my career, but I'd like to tell you a bit more about the story of my career. And I want to take you back 11 years ago. I'm the manager of the Access Service, been there for a while. I've just finished my doctoral thesis, just submitted it. I have 2 young children, 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and I'm 6 months pregnant. And the head of the area where I work is leaving, and the position becomes vacant. And I'm ready for a challenge. Doctoral thesis has finally come in. I'm ready for a challenge. I think, oh, yeah, I got that role. I wonder if I have a chance of getting it. I really want to do it. But there's a hesitation. I've returned twice from maternity leave to my current manager role, and it is really, really challenging. I've moved to other countries where I don't speak the language, nothing compared to returning to a manager role from maternity leave. It's very difficult. It takes a huge amount of energy, time, and skill to do it. And I'm thinking, this time I got that job, I'd be returning to a more senior management role. There's a lot of change down the organization. I'd have 3 children under the age of 5. And I'm like, you know what? I'll have a chat with a woman who's done this. She'll be able to reassure me. Don't worry, you'll be grand. So a quick scan around the organization. I think, God, there's actually no women with young children in my own management, in my own area. Well, okay, I'll just look at somebody else. It's like, oh, there's nobody actually in the organization. There's simply no women at that level at that time with young children. And the level above at that time was all men. And I cast my mind back over the previous 10 years. There has to be somebody I must be able to have a conversation with. I couldn't think of anybody. I don't know everybody, maybe there was somebody, but I couldn't think of them. There's such a moment of isolation. I thought, oh, there's no reassuring chat. And then I kind of just talked to myself and said, right, look, you've returned twice, you did okay. You've combined manager role with 2 kids and your doctorate. You know, you'll probably manage this as well. Stick in the application anyway. Of course, I don't talk about that with anybody. I just keep it inside, you know, put in the application. And I want to read you a little excerpt from my journal from that time, a couple of weeks later. I skipped down the stairs of the University Education Building. Well, as much as you can skip downstairs when you're 7 months pregnant. I've just passed my doctoral viva. For a person from a working class background, I feel like I've come a long way. The previous week, I was offered and accepted that head of function role. The week before that, after months of careful negotiation during this time of national financial crisis, I finally get agreement to keep my staff at 25, and we can continue in the work that we really believe in, promoting access to higher education and community engagement. 5 weeks later, we complete a major move to new offices while remaining fully operational, delivering our work as normal. The following morning, 2 weeks early and in a hurry, my third child was born, just 30 minutes after arriving at the hospital, no time for an epidural. A daughter after 2 sons. It feels like everything I touch turns to gold. I feel invincible. 3 weeks later, my daughter is diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. And when that happens, when your child is diagnosed with a genetic illness, lifelong, life-limiting, progressive, your world falls apart, and you know you can't put it together again in the same way. And of course, if there's nobody that I can see with young children who has returned after maternity leave at that level, then you know there is nobody with young children with a serious illness. So there is still no one to talk to. It is profoundly isolating. I don't know anyone in my network anywhere who I can have a conversation with. But you know, you get on with things. So to keep a child with cystic fibrosis alive, to keep them as well as possible, you have to do hours of daily treatment. And between myself and my husband, we learned how to do all of that. We learned how to use all the medications, how to use a nebulizer, how to get immense amounts of calories into our child, how to build up relationships with the hospital, how to do all the research to make sure you can have a good conversation with them, how to support our children emotionally, not just our child with cystic fibrosis, but our other children, and that impact of a genetic illness in the family. And the hospital appointments and all the times when she's unwell, and the worry, the constant worry, the worry about now, the worry about the future. And the relentless scheduling. There's hours of work that have to be done. There's no day where you can't do it. You have to keep that mucus out of those lungs. You have to keep your child alive. All that has to be fitted in. We get on with it. I also learned how to do my new job. Don't talk about any of that, of course, with anybody in the organization, but I learned how to do my new job. And there's a lot of success in that new job. I say, I look like I'm doing fine. We pull in, you know, $1 million of funding philanthropy. We set up a massive project for 30 organizations. We move services into our team. We move really successful projects into academic schools. I still have research papers published and so on. Keep it all going for 5 years. And it probably looks like it's all going fine. But beneath that, myself and my husband are pedaling very furiously. He is also a senior manager. And it's interesting, when we got that diagnosis, I immediately was like, I better resign. In fact, I'll just write my letter now. I talked myself out of it, but it didn't occur to him. Just as worried and upset as I was, but it didn't occur to him to resign. Earning the same amount of money parents at that time didn't resign. So there are gendered reactions to all of that. And I do emphasize today, I'm talking about the impact on work. There's loads of aspects of the story that I talk about, but I'm talking about work for obvious reasons. 5 years in, my daughter becomes really unwell. The hospital say she is, you know, struggling to, she's not thriving and she needs a feeding tube. And I'm like, give me one chance to feed my child. I need carers leave. Organisation is very supportive. I say, I'm going, I need carers leave, I have to try and, you know, help my child. And the organisation is very supportive, and amidst all of the terror for your child and that desperate feeling that you want it to be well, there is a little part of me saying, what about my career? I've worked really hard to be here. What about my career? And I really long for somebody to come and tap me on the shoulder and say, I know this is awful, and I know you need to go and try and feed your child and keep her alive, but I have been here and I've done this, and this is what you'll do, and it will be okay. You will get back to your career. And there is a little part of me saying, I'm not earning my own money. I've earned money in some shape or form since I was 13 or 14. 30 years of earning my own money. I'm not going to earn my own money. I'm really uncomfortable with that. But it feels like it's taboo to say all of that. It almost feels like I'm not allowed to say things like, what about my career? I want to keep my child alive, but what about my career? What about money? And there's no one to say it to anyway. It's still completely isolating. I have nobody to say it to who's in the same position as me. I take 3 years off. My child, thankfully, we restore her to very good health, and I return. But again, you're returning after 3 years to a head of function position. I don't know anyone who's done that. There's still nobody to talk to about that. But you know, those moments are really isolating, they're very challenging, but there's actually worse. You know, the very worst moments that I've encountered in trying to combine caring with career are the double binds. And we heard some examples of those earlier. And let me give an example or two of the double binds that I've encountered. You know that story I told you 11 years ago? I was going for that job. So I was 6, 7 months pregnant, 7 months by the time the interviews came. The job was advertised for 6 months. Senior manager position, 6-month position. I'm 6 months, 7 months pregnant. The job is only for 6 months. That is a double bind. What do you do in that situation? Later in my career, I have been very fortunate to take some parental leave, and I was taking a day a week, and I was taking up a new role, and I wanted to continue to take 1 day with parental leave to do all this work, to try and manage appointments and everything involved in having a child with cystic fibrosis. And I applied for the job, got it, and said, I'd like to continue to take my 1 day with parental leave. And the response was, oh, if you want to take parental leave, you have to do this job over here, or 1 day with parental leave, you have to do this job over here. I didn't actually apply for that job. That job doesn't actually look like a very long-term job to me. Meanwhile, the job that I've applied for and got, I'm told you can only have block parental leave, despite 1 day in a policy. You can only have them in summer holidays, and you have to be 6 months in the job before you can take it. That is a double bind. And what I would say, but there's an even worse one than that. When I was on Paris Even Career Break and away from the organisation, I began to realise I was internalising all of this. This isn't my personal issue to solve. This is a structural issue, societal. This is an organisational issue. If we're going to promote women, presume we want to, right? Some of those women are going to have babies, and some of those babies are going to have disabilities and illnesses. So this is a different conversation, and I began to speak about this conversation in a different way, and I was met with resistance. I was thinking, okay. And the worst double bind of all is that if I speak out about this, is this going to have an impact on my reputation, on my relationships in the organisation, on my career? But if I don't speak out about it, if I continue to internalise, then it's going to have an impact on my mental health. And that is the worst double bind of all. And I'd say to you in the organisation, if you find yourself in that, seek support. I didn't. I stayed quiet. If nobody to talk to, I stayed quiet. But I don't do that now. Seek support. And for those of us who are managers in the organisation, if you get a request, take a moment to say, with your response, am I putting something in a double bind? And let's not do it. It's a health and safety issue, I think, for organisations. Double binds are a health and safety issue. Let's not do that. I do want to say that there are great supports in this organisation. I've received loads of great supports around this challenging situation. Some great line managers who are fantastic. I've had great colleagues. There's a lot of good training, you learn a lot of good skills, there's a lot of flexibility. So loads of great things are into you, Dublin, and let's build on that. But there are areas that need attention. We've spoken about returns, about flexible models, realistic flexible models. Could we have a strategic scheduling service where a manager or a staff member can go to the service and say, I've got a request, how can I make this work? It's easy to make flexible working work if you're prepared to do. So let's put that service in place. There's training, training is definitely needed for leaders around this. There are definitely some managers who are very flexible and others not. So training is definitely needed. And specialist career support is also needed. I'd love to see that in the organisation. Language, can we please stop calling maternity leave? Can we not just call it maternity work? Where is so-and-so? Oh, she's doing maternity work. Where is so-and-so? He's doing caring work. And career break. Drop the word break. Let's just say what they're doing. She's doing caring work. And if we use the word work, it's much easier then to recognise the skills. We've all spoken about all the skills that we've acquired through this situation. Could we recognise those skills and make it much easier for people to speak about those skills? And to give an example, you may have heard this week that the cystic fibrosis drug Captrio was made available to 35 children. And unfortunately, my daughter was one of those 35 children. It's been a challenging year and a roller coaster of a week. And I was very actively involved in that campaign. And you find yourself doing newspaper interviews, doing TV interviews, and I even found myself saying those immortal words, "Hi Joe, how are you?" I never ever pictured myself with Joe Duffy, actively on Joe Duffy as opposed to trying to defend something. Anyway, off you go. So, and you learn to tell your story, and you learn to advocate, and you learn to speak out. And I'm quite a private person. I didn't want to do that, but I realised I had to. If I want that drug for my daughter, and I really wanted that drug for my daughter, I have to do it. And look, it's a great campaign we've got. So you pick up all these skills. So why not create an organisation culture where we can recognise all the skills that the Prof has spoken about? And can I just say, I know that in telling this story, there's a lot of privilege in my story. There's a lot of things in my story that have, enabled me to still be here at work. And I do want to really acknowledge that. I don't want to name it all out, but it must be obvious it's a story. There's two of us, two income coming in, various things that make it easier, that make it doable. I just want to acknowledge that. I don't know how people do it who don't have those privileges. And I'm also conscious of a lot of stories we're not hearing today. We want to be representative, but we're not, of our students and our staff and the society in Ireland. So we're not representative of the stories we're not hearing. I'm very conscious of young carers in our students, 17, 18-year-olds. caring for the younger siblings, caring for the parents. And we don't go think of that in addition to other carers. And I suppose last I would say there's so many benefits to doing this well. High performing organizations do this well. And let's create a really positive learning experience for the fantastic students that we have. I suppose what I'm saying is, you know, could we step into this space together and make it a little bit easier and bring all the benefits of doing this well for this TU Dublin community, our staff and our students. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thanks to all our speakers, Sarah, Naomi, and Karen, along with Julie, because you have given us a lot of an understanding about the lived experience that is so deep and so rich that I think as an organisation we can bring that into our thinking. And I think, Noreen, there are some voices, Noreen, that we have not included to date, that people who have not been able to be here with us today, but would like us to voice their experience, and Noreen is going to do that now.
Yes, so we opened a forum for people to give us their experience in written form. We got about 30 responses, half and half, employees and students. Majority white Irish, about 6% minority ethnic staff and students, and majority women, 28 out of 30 were women. So I suppose from employees, the themes were that they found juggling and care work difficult. They felt they didn't really have the space or opportunities to talk about their difficulties. They really stressed the need for flexibility from the organisation, as Julie has said, and for predictability, so that you can manage everything that you have to manage and plan properly. They stressed the need for more awareness of the types of family leave or family work, I suppose, that are available, or time to do family work, and also more options around part-time work, job sharing, and reduced hours. So everything that Julie was speaking about there very much came through from the employees who gave us their experiences. With regard to maternity leave, suggestions included keep in touch days during maternity leave, the option to be advised of job opportunities while you are on maternity leave, and a more structured return to work for people returning. The cost of creche was a huge concern, and I think we've heard that today at multiple points. The inflexibility of creche rules was obviously a concern, and the lack of availability of services. With regard to the impact of COVID, the opportunity to now work remotely some of the time was cited as a benefit to some people, and time saved on commuting was really appreciated. One academic in particular, and this came through in Athena Swan as well, said her research outputs suffered during COVID because of the hugely increased workload that kind of having to stay at home involved. I suppose from students, the main sense from those with care responsibilities was that it was extremely stressful experience for them. They talked about it being a juggle, needing to balance everything, which is very difficult, and feeling guilty, like feeling guilty with regard to college work or feeling guilty with regard to your family responsibilities. For mature students whose partners are in employment, the lack of financial assistance was a source of stress. And I think we've heard about this multiple times, navigating social welfare rules and supports. That was hugely stressful for a lot of people. And for students who combine paid work, college and care, having to do unpaid placement again came through as causing financial and logistical difficulties. And I think we heard that from Naomi and from people in the chat as well. One student suggested we need to do much more awareness raising across all areas of the university on the challenges that students with care responsibilities face. So a few students said that their lecturers were actually quite flexible, and others said that their course requirements were very inflexible and very difficult to navigate. International employees and students with care responsibilities talked about the difficulties they face as they have no family support. And they also really talked about the lack of availability of creche spaces being a big problem. So there were also contributions which stressed that we need to challenge the gender norms that lead many women to take a disproportionately higher share of caring responsibilities. One contributor noted that this had knock-on financial impacts, for example, a pension gap between herself and her husband. The need to understand care work in its broadest sense also came through, not just care for children, but also elder care and all types of care. And then I suppose another people also talk about we have to have an ongoing conversation on combining care responsibilities and paid work and get beyond the fears of talking about it, meaning that you're not up to the job or you're not up to the coursework or all of that. That was what came through from the written responses, and we thank everybody who contributed.
Thank you. Thank you, Noreen, for bringing those perspectives into the room. That's wonderful. I now open the floor, both virtually and in person. And so we will have a discussion based on that. So I see Shauna is offering immediately. Shauna, you might like to say who you are?
Yes, I was going to start with that. I'm Shauna Lawler. I'm the head of employee engagement. It's a new team. Honestly, I'm so grateful to you all for sharing your stories. I'm also so grateful that this is an environment where people feel that level of trust and they can share such deeply personal stories. I'm so grateful to you for that. You mentioned Linda Murray, I think, set up the Caring Network, and she's actually just joined our employee engagement team. So that's something that we're really passionate about, you know, building on that and looking at additional support. So I'd love to chat to you all again, maybe separate to this, to see what else we can do. It's just a couple of things that jumped out to me. You know, we actually were in menopause Symposium yesterday and looking at all those things around menopause leave, and we'd love for us to be brave and take those leaps and be leaders, and we'd love for that to happen. We're certainly going to advocate and work with Yvonne and teams on some of those things. There's some lovely phrases, you know, Judy, you mentioned around stepping into this space together, and that's really something that myself and the team are so passionate about, and hopefully that we can bring to the university. But you know, you do, and sometimes you're in those moments, you look around, you're like, who else has been in this boat that I can look to? So it's so wonderful that you can be that person for other people. Maybe one or two people on this call are saying, God, has anybody else navigated this? Thank you so much for sharing that. And just on a kind of a closing note, you mentioned around the culture. One of the things that Aoife and I are working on is developing a staff charter, and we're really trying to build in this culture of, and we're using the language from our strategy, our people strategy, a culture of care. That's something that we're really passionate about. Honestly, I think even from this room, if we're all willing to share these stories, there's a little nub of that there. It's just a matter of really building on it and ensuring that we have the structures and supports in place that really make it, you know, not just another saying on paper, it's something we're doing, but we just actually just want to say thank you. I'm honestly just so delighted that I came and heard your stories, and thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Shauna. That's really helpful. Yes.
I just I'm Sue from Family Carers Ireland, and I'd just like to absolutely acknowledge the stories that you've shared today. I've met Karen before, I think, on a webinar, and I suppose we were introduced first to you, Dublin, through Linda, and her passion for caring, and I have to say that because she's been amazing. But actually, just touching on something that you said there, Shauna, and I think it needs to be addressed as well. I think as women, we kind of get it from every angle, and so many women are in their 40s and 50s who are caring, as well as all ages, but within that we're also coping with menopause, and there's no understanding of that whatsoever. So it comes hand in hand of those things as well. So I think the more that all of these policies, we're in year 3 with Irish Life in our caring employers program, and as a direct result of them looking more at their carer policies, they've now introduced 6 more policies that include bereavement and menopause policy and all of that. So I think it absolutely has to start with a conversation, and for them it was acknowledging the carers that they had working for them, and to see how it's progressed and developed in such a positive way for an organization, I think is phenomenal, and I think so much can be learned from them actually, in terms of bringing the conversation more to the fore.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks very much indeed. I just want to bring Kevin in. Kevin has put something online. I apologize to the people online who have been putting comments in along the way. Everybody can see them here, by the way, because we have it up on the screen at the back. But, Kevin has a question. So Kevin, I'd like to bring you in at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne. Just a question. Could the idea of a carer being able to travel with his or her client, if the client wishes to visit family or friends for a weekend, be explored.
That's an interesting one, Kevin, but can you be slightly more explicit about the circumstances around something like that?
Yeah, well, let's say the family member may be, that the visiting may be elderly and not able to look after the visitor, those sort of circumstances.
Oh, yeah.
It's
yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Any thoughts, any responses to Kevin's point? No, we're dwelling on that, Kevin.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I have, sorry. You okay? We have two people offering now. So Alicia and Helen from the room.
Yeah, thank you so much for your contributions, because we all have our own struggles, but then we can really appreciate those versatile and really deep struggles as well. But I think in terms of the changing culture, that while we talk about it, then in the narrative it doesn't come through, because what's being said is we women, or like you said, employers need to accept that those women will have children. No, those people will have children. So I guess, just from my own example, it took us a long time to cover with my husband that he was able to say to his employer, I'm doing half day today because the child is sick. My wife is doing half day. Well, in the beginning, that was like, sure, your wife can do it. She's working from home. But I think it's not about the woman having that flexibility, both parts. And the kind of it's not a culture about being sympathizing with the working mother. It's, as you said, it's work, and it's work with both parts, I think.
Okay, and it's the institution doing the hard yards to put these policies in place and structures in place and mindsets. Mindsets in particular.
If you're going to make this mobile and absolutely on policy, definitely institutional change. But the negotiations at home are really, really important, and they don't get enough conversation.
But they need to have institutional support. So the manager of the man can say, "Oh, I hear your child is sick.
Exactly.
You're doing half. Your wife is doing half. I completely understand that."
It is the combination.
Yes.
So it's change in the institution, in the organisation, both, whoever has children, and it's the negotiations at home. They are both policy and practice and the research. It all matters to do change.
And I think the problem is that the man tends to earn more. So and I have that, and I'm sure everybody that this room would, or most people that will sympathize with that whose job is at stake here? The one who is earning, which earning brackets we're looking at.
Okay, so Helen, you had a thought there, and I think I'll bring in next.
Yeah, thanks very much to everyone. Again, just really, really inspiring, all your contributions, and it's humbling. I just thought one of the points that Julie raised about internalizing and individualizing what is structural problems. I think that's a really, really important message. I mean, we hear it all the time, in different contexts, be it, it came up when we were looking at, people's promotions and within the civil service, people say, oh, well, I can't do that. The way I somehow, I'm not up to that job because of something internally, because I can't do it. But actually, rather than saying, no, actually the problem is the nature of the job and what's been asked of the people who are occupying the role. And so I think that is a really important shift, so that we're not internalizing all the guilt and responsibility, because it is a structural issue. I just wanted to ask Sarah, actually, you mentioned carers' passports, and it's not something that I'd heard of before, so I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little on that.
Yeah, carers, well, I suppose it appealed to me because it's something that we would have for our children anyway. You would have a communication passport for my daughter, so wherever she goes, she has this communication passport. People can take it, read it, and they know what her support needs are, what her triggers are, and everything else. But this is something they've introduced in the UK. There's carerspassports.co.uk, I think it is, but I can find that out for you. So basically it's a document that travels with you as a carer. So within that document that you create with your employer, you can do that piece of negotiation about what's going to work best, how can we support you, what's going to be viable, what is within all the practices and policies, and the carer can then take that passport with them. So as you perhaps get promoted through the organisation, you take that passport with you. So that negates the need to continually be explaining again and again and again, which does make you feel you're apologising again and again and again and again. You know, so I think it's a really positive initiative.
Thank you very much for elaborating on that concept of carers passport. Catherine.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to come back to, I suppose, November. And I'm not promoting November. I think there's a huge cultural piece in looking at the constitution of the woman's place being in the home. And I think, I would like to think that traditionally that was put in there as a way of valuing women's, what women have brought. However, that's not how it's really panned out. And I think, educationally, socially, transgenerationally, we have been brought up, and we probably still are, bringing up people to believe that the woman's place is in the home and the men do the paid work. And therefore, any caring that has to be done is done by the woman, because even unconsciously, it's in the constitution that that's our job. But it's not valued and it's not paid. And I think, as well as all the institutional, organizational bits that have to change, and that we all have to, I suppose, stand up and take part in making change. I think it's a huge thing for the entire nation to stand up and say, actually, this shouldn't be the women's role in the Constitution. But, because I think as long as it's in there, there's almost like an unconscious bias towards that's our job. And I think that's why it happens that when a child is sick, the woman has to leave work. When a hospital appointments, the woman has to go. But I don't think it enters for a lot of men, and this isn't being, I'm not being, against men, but I don't think it enters their head that I have to take Thursday afternoon up to the job. It just doesn't enter their head. But we're automatically filling out the calendar. We're automatically pre-planning ahead. Well, I have to be there at that appointment that I missed. I think people make that if I miss that appointment, even though it's private, I'll wait another 6 months to get it. So that has to happen regardless of what my other responsibilities are. So I think there's a huge cultural shift and a huge cultural acknowledgement that has to happen for any of this work to change or any of these bits to change. Because I think it's just been so, in our constitution, it's unconsciously spread out to that's our role. And if we can look at education, what traditionally put boys towards versus girls, it's like STEM has traditionally been men because that's where they're going to work. And so I think it's just a massive piece. So I think the constitutional thing is going to be huge when it comes up.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. You just might, just for the benefit of everybody here, just say who you are, because I know you and love you dearly.
I'm Catherine Bulger. I'm a psychologist in the college, and I'm working with EDI on the Ending Sexual Violence and Harassment and Implementation Plan from the government.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for your contribution around that area. I have 3 people in the room offering, so I will take them in turn.
Hi everybody, my name is Cleo McCormick. I'm here from version 1, which is a technology company. So I'm going to be having a chat with you guys in a little while. Well, a couple of things. First of all, I just want to say, wow, guys, you guys are unbelievable. So I'm so humbled and in awe at your tenacity, your strength, your resilience, and just listen to your stories. And it reminded me of last week. I was at the Women in STEM conference and listening to some of the female speakers, and it could have been any one of you. And something it reminded me of is something that you said, if you can't see her, you can't be her. And I just loved hearing your stories. That I think we need to celebrate these stories more. We need more men in the audience. I'm looking around, hello. And we had a room full of like hundreds of women at Women in STEM and no men. And there's a couple of men there, but it's like that again, if there was more men hearing this, there would be more empathy. And I am a mother of 2 boys. I sympathize with the lady who said about the CHIPS scheme, where we were told if we picked Oscar up early and he's upset, he doesn't want to be in after school, we'd lose our place because they have to report back. During lockdown, myself and my husband were both doing 2 new jobs with a 6-month-old baby and a 4-year-old. And his job was going, Richard, can you not look after the kids? No, she can't. And because he was sticking up for me, I felt grateful. Because I was like, am I so lucky to have a husband who sticks up for me? And then I do more childcare because it's that female load, because I feel grateful. And listening to all the women leaders in our organisation, one of the girls on my team, Aoife, did her dissertation in this. And she said that interviewed, none of the men talked about their wife and the contributions, but every single one of the female leaders said that they were so grateful that they had a husband who allowed them to do what they do. Why are we so grateful? You know, like,
Why are they allowing?
saying that out loud, and I was like, I'm not grateful anymore. It's just, I'm not grateful, you know. But I just want to say, guys, you rock, and honest to God, I was nearly moved to tears. But I just think you're incredible, and I don't mean that in a patronising way. I just mean we need to share these stories, and we need more men in the room. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Theo. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to hearing
Yeah.
you later today. So Ashley.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Thank you for sharing all those stories. It was wonderful. Thank you so much. I am an academic doing an exchange from Turkey. I'm an academic in Kadir University. I just wanted to thank you all for the shares and also add maybe a missing part of our idea of care and who gives care. I do family science, so families are my unit of analysis as well, but families are a strange thing. I'm a single person, and my family are my friends primarily, my parents as well. And the people I care for are actually my friends. Currently, I care for my best friend who's incarcerated. So not only do we care for our families, but we also care for people who are not our kin. And that's totally unrecognized in the governmental systems, in the workplaces, any aspect of our social life. We don't care much about friendships. Although we do in our informal lives depend a lot on friendships and the care we get from friends and non-family. So caregiving needs to be more inclusive of non-kin, especially for diversity. LGBT communities depend a lot on family, non-family members. Immigrants depend a lot on non-family members to care for. Single people depend extensively on friendship networks. But staying over at the hospital with a friend is unrecognized. So that's one piece we need to be mindful about.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. That's really helpful to bring into the equation.
I'm
Yes.
Grania, Access Support Manager here in Grange Werman. Do want to say thank you again, everybody, for sharing your stories, really great stories. And I think you can probably all identify with snippets of everybody's stories, which is probably a little unfortunate, and probably can. The idea of language, I think, is really, really important. And it's something that I think we can consider. I definitely felt isolated when I was on maternity leave. Like when you go out with a group of friends and everybody talks about their job, and nobody asks you what you do all day, every day, 24 hours a day, like that's quite isolating. And that's really important. So I think language is really important. When I returned to work, nobody asked my husband how many days was he returning to the office. I don't know how many times I got asked, was I okay? It was like 5 days, it was like 4 days. And I like kind of freak out and I kind of like, this is not so frustrating. But you're internally, but externally, you go, no, I'm in really good position. I have to return 5 days a week. But in my head, nobody asked my husband this. Nobody asked my husband this, you know. So these are challenging conversations. The challenging conversations as well are exhausting. Like people are saying, why do you let men? Why do you let men? I don't let my husband. My husband gets more during the night than I do. I just don't hear. My hearing's not great. So he gets up more during the night. But also, when I was packing bags, like, you know, nappy bags and stuff, I let him make mistakes. You know, I remember when I forgot a food or when I forgot, you know, I remember when I stopped breastfeeding and went up for months and I was like, yeah, I have to pack milk, but I didn't bring a bottle. You know, so I made those mistakes. So if I don't allow my husband to make those mistakes, he's never going to learn. So I think as women, we also need to step back in order to let other people step up. You know, so I think there is a responsibility, but that is exhausting. And that mental load is exhausting. And I think you need to acknowledge that conversation. Because in your head, you know, sit down in the evening and I'm like, oh, no, okay, so now, you know, this child's growing out at this age and we need to do this, and we take that down to the attic, we need to do this, and you're all these conversations as well as your full-time job, you know, like, so there's a lot going on that we think we can do. And then I'm going to wrap up then with the university. We have an opportunity here where people are sharing very personal stuff, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that and to take it. And I think with the OD, it's really, really challenging at the moment. Like I was looking to used to be my line manager, who was never on meetings before 10 o'clock because they were core hours. You never organize a meeting unless you knew the person was always in at a certain time. You might say something, but otherwise it's never. That's now started to change. I think that's important. things like if we're talking like something as simple as don't have a mastery lesson on the 9 o'clock, like if we're in this huge organizational change, like, let's look at this as a positive. Like, I'm sure we've all grumbled in place of like, you know, the OD, but these are really good opportunities that we have. And no, okay, well, why are things up in the air? Why don't we let them fall in a better position when they're starting to fall? And look at how that works. And if we have to be on talent campus, or if we have to be on this campus or that campus or the other campus, I think it's an opportunity to go, okay, well, actually, you need 3 weeks notice. You can't just change somebody's location for a specific meeting next Thursday or this Thursday. Like, I walked to Grange Foreman. If I were to do a Tala on a Lewis, it's 90 minutes. You know, so you're kind of thinking about, okay, what does that look like for somebody I have to do a school run, or he does a school run, what days am I in? Like, I'd often text my husband, what day are you in next week? What day am I in next week? So these are all really, really important conversations. I just think, so it's great that we have this passion and this idea, but the next question is, how are we going to implement that? You know, how are we actually going to, like, this was advertised, I don't know how often. And again, like I said, I saw one maybe in the room, and two. It's just something that I think we could maybe plan on stronger, because if you are hoping to go for more leadership positions, like, is there an opportunity? Can you see other people? If you talk up, are you somebody that's going to be a bit obstinate and figure your answer for that? So there's lots to think about, but I'm hopeful, very, very hopeful. So hopefully it will be better for students and for staff and for the wider society, and be a leader as we hope.
Thank you very much indeed. And turning to yourself.
There's so much I want to say about this subject, but first I want to say it's amazing to listen to Paul. I'm stunning, to be honest.
Would you like to introduce?
My name is Thomas. My interest in this is really, I'm not a care worker, but I'm looking after my mom who's 95 and on herself with mom. But I'm a musician and composer, and I work. This is all kind of just dawning on me as I'm sitting here. I sometimes work in care homes, and that's something actually just thrown in one. If anybody's anyway connected with care homes that do anything like that are interested in having 2 people come and play, please contact me. But what I'd like to say is, like, I'm very aware that I'm one of 2 men here, and I'm really disappointed. I mean, I can only talk for myself. And by the way, I do actually schedule things in regards to taking care of. Let me say men don't. This one. But language, I think that was such an interesting bunch you said. Change the languages, and we can do that. We don't need a law to do that. Just address it as it is, you know. That's something we can all do. But yeah, I have to say I'm disappointed in the men for not taking more responsibility or showing more interest. I don't understand it, to be honest. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you very much for your contribution. And just also to say that Kevin is online, and we have 21 other participants. So hopefully there are other men joining this conversation and listening in and learning as well. So thank you for that point. But it's obvious that we do need work to do in this area.
This was something that came up just at the open evening. I observed that a lot of males that would come in would kind of run by the social care stand because it's perceived to be a female profession. Now, there are guys on my course that there's not very many, but it's perceived more as a female role in social care, but men are needed in that role as well. But it is society and their views as well.
Yes,
just in relation to the male conversation here, I feel I need to speak on behalf of my husband a little bit. And I did say he did the macro, we made a pact. He did the macro, I did the micro. At the time, my daughter, if her father picked her up, you would think that he was abducting her. She wouldn't go near him. She wouldn't let him touch her, hug her, anything. She was all over me. So he said, I can't do this. I can't. She doesn't want me in this space, you know. But what he could do was he could get us school places. He set up charities. He did that. Now, I also want to acknowledge that he has a very good job. His employer was very flexible, so he was fortunate. But I feel I do need to say that, you know, for us it worked just to play to our strengths and our situation. And that's perhaps something that should be part, as Julie was saying, part of the conversation in the home, because that's what worked for us, and it actually made us stronger. And the statistics for partnerships breaking up when you are in that situation are frightening. So, you know, we just celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary. It actually made us stronger.
I think carers had statistics on male carers and female carers.
It's 68% female carers.
Okay. Julie, point on that. I think there's something about the word care, and we've just been talking about this. But I only when I was on care leave and I started private stage did I actually realize care. I'm doing these hours. I'm doing these hours of care work every day. Like I'm a mother, I'm a parent. I'm a carer. I'm a child with serious illness. Why did it take me 5 or 6 years to grasp I was actually a carer? So if that's me taking 5 or 6 years resisting that part of my identity, when I clearly was doing hours of care work as my husband was here, and I can only imagine that for people who aren't in such fast and extreme circumstances, it takes longer to realise. And maybe for men, it takes even longer again. There is something about the word I resisted it completely. I'm still a bit care. Now, if it's work, we thought it work is different. So it's back to language. There was something about
Sarah said she refused the term as well.
There's something about care, and even this event when I was chatting to some of my colleagues, and they were saying, I hope that goes really well. I won't be going to, I don't have any care responsibilities myself. And I'm like, you do. Remember all this? I didn't say it to them. I felt it was being a bit rude. So there is something about this word care that we don't. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't understand it, but there's something about it. We don't grasp at what we do is care. And I think that there's loads of people do care. And there's a really high percentage of our community, students and staff, and I completely agree about friends. And we were very careful to put that in the advertising for the event. We do feel very strongly that people do all sorts of types of care, but there's something about the language. And I think maybe that explains why some people are in the room and some aren't. So it's definitely part of the conversation, isn't it? I know we spoke about it. I'm sure we referenced it as well soon.
Yeah.
And this will be a conversation that we will continue after our short comfort break. Sorry, Catherine, let you in again. Okay. And we will obviously continue into the future. So we'll have a short comfort break until 12:15 when we'll have our next panel. Thank you all very much indeed.
Okay.